This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so LifeLock wants to remind you to update your passwords. Using the same password across multiple accounts makes you vulnerable to cybercriminals. For comprehensive identity theft protection, let LifeLock alert you to anything suspicious and fix any issues. Start protecting your identity today with a 30-day free trial at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hey everybody, it's Dan. Before we get going, I just want to let you know some of the different ways you can learn more about the stories that we're telling, to see and hear and read for yourself some of the stuff that we're talking about in the show. Number one, visit our Patreon at deviantpodcast.com. There you can find things like documents, listen to 911 calls, watch videos about some of the stuff that we're talking about. Also, you can interact with us and see some of the stuff we're doing on social. TikTok and Instagram at deviant.podcast is where you can find us. So if you want to go into more depth on the stories that we're telling, those are both great places to visit. All right, let's get to the show. As always, there are parts of the show that may not be suitable for all audiences.
If I said something profane, people are going to know that was normal.
So how far is the sheriff's office from Great Waters?
We're going to find out. It's 15. Let's say it's 14 miles. Let's see in just a minute. Okay? And I went the Sparta Highway that morning to avoid traffic, which was a little further actually to go that way, but I knew I could run 100 most of the way.
Sheriff Sills is pulling his black Suburban out of the Putnam County Sheriff's Office, and he's got passengers. I'm in the front seat, and Clark, our executive producer, is in the back seat. And sitting next to him in the back, Agent Andy Smith of the FBI, who you'll hear from later. And while we ride through the county, Howard Sills will be the first to tell you he was basically destined to do this work. When did you know you wanted to work in law enforcement?
Pretty much all my life. I didn't want to practice law. I wouldn't mind have been district attorney if I could try the death penalty case every day. But if I did not want, I worked for law firms all through college, doing wills and divorces and running the real estate titles, and if I had to do that, I'd go batshit. This right here was the original county seat of Baldwin County up until 1807, right here. This was Hillsborough, and Putnam County was created in 1807, and it remained the county seat until Edenton was laid out and everything until 1809, and my folks were already here.
And being the sheriff means knowing the people in this county, who's coming and who's going. So if you had to guess in 2014, like how many people were living in Great Waters full-time versus now?
I couldn't come up with a number, but not nearly as many then as now.
Yeah.
For instance, on this street, only a couple of people lived there full-time then.
Was that problematic for the investigation because you didn't have...
Well, again, it's not what was there, it's what wasn't there. If I work a case up here on North Madison Avenue, okay? I know every damn body on that street, with the exception of these new people that have moved here and bought some of these old homes, okay? I've got that knowledge, plus there's somebody next door and stuff like that, but there's nobody next door at these houses. Nobody's living there, so nobody sees anything. Now, it's not so much up there. You got people, did you see anything unusual? You've got nobody to even ask.
Right. As we pull off the main road and into the security gates of the private Great Waters community, the trees make way for the large open fields and golf courses. They don't like letting people in to wander around with microphones, asking about unsolved murders. They're gonna be like, great, the sheriff's here again? At the guardhouse?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't even hardly know who they usually recognize me. I don't know who's here today. I don't even know who works. I'm Sheriff Sills.
But Sheriff Sills isn't just people. And as we pull into the community, he gives us the Reynolds Lake Oconee backstory.
Old man Reynolds was a 3-tier down robber baron that somehow acquired a process that stabilized cottonseed oil. Okay, and made a fortune. He's from Cincinnati. They're not from here. Okay. And they weren't like Goodyear or people like that. They couldn't have an island off the Georgia coast.
Yeah.
But they could afford to have 20,000 acres on the Oconee River in Georgia to hunt and fish and fuck on. It costs a fortune just to live in here.
So when this happened back in 2014, we're riding around this neighborhood and I'm thinking, this is probably a pretty insulated neighborhood and there's probably a whole lot of, oh my God, we're not safe, etc. Did you have to come to
No.
the clubhouse and meet with residents and talk to,
No.
No,
I mean, I did. When we did this one big interview, I spoke to, we told them this was, this was not some wild drug crazed person running loose in the neighborhood. And I had to do that with 2 or 3 other, groups, not just here, but out in the Lake Oconee area. It's still when I go speak somewhere, that's the number one thing people out here want to talk about still today.
We're all wired differently. Some of us are wired for good, some of us are wired for bad, but a select few step outside of all society's boundaries. From Cold Open Media, this is Deviant, the Lake Oconee Murders, Part 2.
Welcome back to Deviant, where we're chasing the truth into the dark corners of what humans are capable of. I'm Andrew Iden.
And I'm Dan Simitovich. Thanks for coming back and being with us. The discovery of Russell Dermond's decapitated body on the floor of his garage, it's obviously a shock to the friends who find him, and it's a mystery to the police investigating this. His head is missing, nowhere to be found, and there aren't many clues to go on here. What happened to Russell? Where is his head? But more immediately, where is his wife, Shirley? She's just gone. The Putnam County Sheriff's Department is leading an all-out search for her. One of the big questions for them is how the murderers arrived and how they left with Shirley. Was it by car or was it by boat using the lake?
I had my deputies in our patrol boats and the state DNR.
That's the Georgia State Department of Natural Resources. They sometimes help out when it comes to things in the woods or on the water.
What were we looking for? Quite candidly, anything, okay? There was nothing specific we were looking for, but anything that might show up in the lake or something like that. So we were out there every day.
It's the second largest lake in Georgia. Sheriff Sills and his investigators have 19,000 acres of water in front of them.
This is a huge lake that's in 4 different counties now. But we did look around the Dermond's house looking for his head. I mean, that's what we were doing. Or looking for Ms. Dermond's body. We drug the dock and things like that. I have sideband sonar on our patrol boat. I mean, we did all that, but we asked the state to come in with they had this device that you could see a Coca-Cola can at 50-foot depth.
The Dermond family is in a horrible kind of limbo. They're mourning Russell and holding out hope that Shirley is still out there. Brad Dermond is one of their sons.
When you went to Great Waters, your mother obviously is gone. I'm sure there was some, a lot of it was just kind of a blur, but was there any kind of thought of maybe mom is gone somewhere with someone? What was kind of the thought of your mom's whereabouts?
That she was abducted because, especially, there's no hint of her being involved in any foul play, and especially, at that time, I'm not sure, but I think she could have been 86 to 87 years old at that time. So our hope was just that she was going to be okay. I think the investigation wanted to flush that out.
Billy Hobbs is skeptical. He's the local reporter we met in the last episode.
So you never believed that she was abducted. You had a vibe that she had been killed then and there.
I did, in fact, believe that from the get-go. And I don't know, it was one of those things that gnaw in your stomach or whatever, and you just have an intuition that, hey, this does not smell to the test that she was abducted. And one of the biggest reasons it stuck out to me, whatever's a crime reporter, was simply that There had been no note. There had been nobody calling the authorities to say, hey, I want X amount of monies or whatever for the kidnapping and the safe return of Shirley Dermond. They never received anything like that. So I knew by that's a humongous telling tale.
We initially approached this thinking that she had been abducted, and that was our focus for about, I think it was about 10 days before her body surfaced.
Dan, I don't know about you, but fall is without question my favorite time of the year.
Oh, I think you do know about me, and I think that's true with me too. I'm a fall boy. I like leaves. I like the crisp air. I like all the things that are, they're cliche to eat and they're cliche to drink. Your pumpkins, this, your apple cider, that. I don't care. I love it.
There is my birthday, my anniversary, and then a number of birthdays in my family. All of this to say...
Oh, so it actually has meaning for you. I just want to consume things.
Yes. So all of this to say that fall is also without question the busiest time of my year every year. And I have no time nor really the desire to do a lot of cooking.
Sure.
And that's where I am jazzed for Factor.
You're jazzed.
Jazz.
I too am jazzed. In fact, this is audio. You can't see this, but I have jazz hands thinking about Factor. I'm so excited to give this a try. We both have some Factor boxes that are ready to be consumed, and it was so simple and so easy to order, and I'm just looking forward to eating mine. And as I said, this is the season of consumption for me, so I'm trying to be smart. So I actually went with the calorie smart option. There's all sorts of different choices that you can make. What did you choose?
I like all things meat, so I went with Protein Plus. And Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are this fall, in between all of your pumpkins and candy and pumpkin spice fiesta, you're always going to have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals.
Yeah, and it's pretty customizable. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors and experiences and taste sensations to explore.
And I've tried a number of the food delivery services.
Yeah.
And usually there's some element that you can just tell that it's like pre-packaged and put together. But these are restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and my personal favorite, blackened salmon.
Yeah, and you don't like to cook, or you're too busy to cook. I don't like to think. And it makes it easy to not think about what I'm eating every day because it does it for me, right? From breakfast to lunch to dinner to snacks to dessert, Factor handles it all for me.
So head to factormeals.com/deviant50 and use code deviant50 to get, that's right, 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month.
That's code deviant50 at factormeals.com/deviant50 to get, what's that? Yes, 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so LifeLock wants to remind you to update your passwords. Using the same password across multiple accounts makes you vulnerable to cybercriminals. For comprehensive identity theft protection, let LifeLock alert you to anything suspicious and fix any issues. Start protecting your identity today with a 30-day free trial at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Putnam County 911.
Yes, ma'am. We just left our house to go fishing from near Long Shoals boat ramp, and we went down towards the dam, Rock Island, and that way. And just before you get to Rock Island, on the left right, that standing timber, it appears to be, we can't get close enough to it, and I don't want to get close enough to it, but it appears like a body floating in the water against a tree over here.
And can you see it from Long Shoals boat ramp?
No, ma'am. If they were to put in there, they need to turn to the right. They'll come down like you're going to go to the dam. When they come around that long point right there, not the one with the flagpole, they're past it, then there's another long point.
One of my deputies Went to the scene in the patrol boat. He was already out there. Sure enough, it was a body, and he just stayed there until I arrived. I had to get I asked DNR for a low freeboard boat. I knew they had one. When I'm talking about, because you got to pick a body. It's very difficult picking up. I picked up a lot of bodies out of water before and put them in a boat, and that's hard to do. And so Miss Dermond's body had come up that area of the lake. When they impounded the Oconee River, they left standing timber. Now, most of the tops of these trees are gone, but Miss Dermond's body had floated over and caught on the top of a tree that was just the top of it, just under the surface of the water, maybe 4 inches or something like that.
I've been out to this part of the lake. It's way out there. It's about 10 to 15 minutes by boat from the dock at the Dermond house. Sheriff Sills describes the lake as a sort of series of trees mostly underwater, some of them poking out just a few inches above the surface. And that standing timber snags anything that floats over it.
When I reached down to get her body, I couldn't lift it. Carlton Peebles, supervisor, special agent with the FBI, was in the boat with me. And he said, Sheriff, there's something. I mean, I'm a pretty strong guy, but I mean, she's a pretty big lady. But he said, there's some kind of rope or something. That's when we discovered that tied to her ankles was a mesh nylon type bag that had 2 cement cap blocks in it. Whomever dumped her body in the lake, they thought she would never come up, but the gases, of course, that build up under the skin and things like that, and decomposition exceeded the 60 pounds of weight that was there, and she eventually floated to the surface. As I said, she was completely clothed with shoes and everything on, and I could tell that she had suffered trauma to her head. That's how we recovered her body. It just eventually came up.
So her death was prior to the water.
She did not drown. The autopsy was clear that she was dead when she was when her body was thrown in the water.
Is there any ability to nail down, and I know an exact time is probably difficult, but a sort of a time of death with Shirley because of the time decomposition, how long it takes the gases in the body to kind of build up or anything?
No, there's no way to determine that. And the fact the body was weighted down even is a whole nother factor there. I mean, we did check with hydrologists. Lake Oconee it did at that time, I guess it still does, actually has a tide. Our 2 lakes have a tide, believe it or not. We even checked about that to see how far the body might have moved, and the answer from the professionals was not very far at all.
According to the autopsy report, Shirley Dermond's cause of death is blunt impact trauma to the head. Her killers make a big effort to keep her body hidden at the bottom of that lake. Before throwing her overboard, they tie on cement blocks. It doesn't work. Back at the house where the crime began, the scene is yielding very, very little.
Like I said, very unusual crime scene. Nothing was disturbed. I personally don't believe Mrs. Dermond was killed there. Okay? There should have been evidence that wasn't there, given the manner she was killed.
Sheriff Sills mentions in our last episode that they believe Russell was killed before the decapitation. And the initial ruling by the medical examiner is that Russell Dermond's cause of death is the decapitation. But that thinking changes.
Of course, Mr. Dermond, we believe he was shot simply because we found some gunshot residue on his shirt, but we don't know that. But the unique thing was the house was totally undisturbed. The bed wasn't made up, so that made us think maybe this happened at night. But it was a strange crime scene because the house looked like it was set up. It was pristine almost, you know what I'm saying? I don't mean it looked like somebody had, I don't want you to think somebody had wiped down the walls or anything like that. We believe this happened on Saturday. And that's an educated guess based on the fact that Ms. Dermond had done a crossword puzzle that was on the kitchen table. The door was closed when the winds got there. It wasn't locked they went in. I mean, yes, the Dermonds had an alarm system, but they didn't have it on. It didn't work. I mean, things like that. He had on a bathrobe and a pair of boxer shorts and a T-shirt. And so, again, we're thinking this happened at night. He's disturbed in the night. But after talking to family members, we learned that he would putter. If he didn't know where to go or nothing, he'd putter around for several hours in the morning, and, reading and things like that, and keep his night clothes on. Now, they said the mother was different, that she would always be fully dressed before she made her entry into anywhere else in the house.
There didn't appear to be a sign of a struggle.
No, there was no sign of any kind of disturbance at all, even in the garage. You know what I'm saying? Blood and decomposition fluid and things like that present where his the remains were there. So that was strange. And, of course, we're talking about people that I didn't know, so we got a search warrant because we didn't even know somebody else might have lived there. We worked that crime scene for certainly well over a month. I think we kept it 2 months before we released it. We dusted every inch of the house.
High-profile unsolved murders, especially in communities where that's pretty rare, usually leads to three things: rumor, conjecture, conspiracy. The Dermond case, no different. Here's Pastor David Key. You heard him in the last episode. He always has his fingers on the pulse of what's happening around town.
Now, remember back at that time frame, you were dealing with jihadists over in the Middle East had just beheaded all these Christians and whatever. And so folks were thinking, oh, goodness, is this some terrorist plot? Is this some dynamic, that has, ramifications and symbolism beyond just a normal murder? And so the beheading dynamic is what really made this homicide sensationalized.
Journalist Billy Hobbs.
We've often heard the idea that most people seem to think it was a hit, meaning a professional hit by an organized crime racket or something, something that had been done, something that happened or whatever many, many years ago, and that the Dermonds were involved in, that they were going to kill them and that they had to cut Mr. Dermond's head off or whatever to take it back to someone to show that, hey, the job has been completed.
Those first days were really just the unsolved murder part of it, the speculation. And one of the reasons why I continued to do these shows there were all kinds of rumors and conspiracy theories. They were connecting the Dermonds to mafia connections. They were, making all kinds of accusations, which just aren't true.
You could say, well, this looks like a mob hit. Well, it also could look like this. This evidence could mean something else.
That's Agent Andy Smith of the FBI. He's based in Macon, Georgia, and has been working alongside Sheriff Sills in solving this case.
And there isn't enough evidence to sway it one way or the other. So we talk about is this the mafia thing? And that's come up a lot. But it's also someone who had access and knowledge about Lake Oconee and be able to navigate that at night. That's tough. Everyone can't do that. And it just doesn't make sense to me that every time I hear, that's the first thing that comes into my mind. Every time someone talks about, is it a mafia hit or something like that? There's no way someone in the mafia is going to come to Lake Oconee in the middle of nowhere in Georgia, back their vehicle in with a boat and be able to navigate Lake Oconee at night. It's not going to happen.
The hitman walks in and shoots you in the head with a .22 Magnum and walks out. When one thinks about this being professional, the only thing professional about this case is they've been able to get by with it, but this rudimentary tying two cap blocks in a bag to anybody who knows anything would know that wasn't going to keep that body down. You see what I'm saying? The hitman, he comes in, he kills you, and he leaves. He doesn't do things like that.
One of those theories isn't actually all that wild. 14 years before Russell and Shirley are murdered, the Dermonds lose a son, Mark, also to homicide. Here's Brad Dermond.
Our oldest brother had a pretty severe drug and alcohol problem and started literally in high school and led all the way up to his death.
On August 30th, 2000, Mark Dermond is attempting to buy drugs in downtown Atlanta, and it also happens to be his 47th birthday.
Their son was a typical drug addict. He was not a drug dealer that started off, stealing his parents' money and mama's jewelry and things like that. In the year 2000, he and some other guy went over to what's called the Gulch in Atlanta today to buy some dope, and the guy that was selling dope decided he'd rob them, shot both of them.
The man who pulls the trigger is Troy Major. He was 25 at the time, and now he's spending the rest of his life in Hays State Prison in northwest Georgia. An early theory is that Russell and Shirley are killed in some kind of decades-long connection to Mark's murder.
I don't know, at least the sheriff had a lot of questions about what took place as it revolved around Mark, but it really didn't make a lot of sense to think that that family would have had anything to do with it, because during even Mark's murder trial, none of our family even attended.
The Dermonds didn't even go to the trial. We had people tell them they just had testified at a parole hearing. Well, first of all, you can't testify at a parole hearing. And secondly, the guy wasn't even coming up for parole.
So for there to be some sort of revenge situation, that didn't make much sense to me. But still, there was, in the early going, that was definitely, there was a lot of focus on that.
I don't know where these stories come from. The fact that they were from New Jersey, therefore they had to be involved in organized crime. What kind of bullshit's that, okay? But the answer is none of the above.
What are some of the other avenues that you guys have looked into, like kind of adjacent to organized crime? Drugs or kind of a random breaking and entering, some of the methods.
Well, we have no breaking and entering in this neighborhood where this occurred. Virtually no crime.
There's probably a lot of people in that community who have family and friends that come visit for a weekend. But if somebody had a nephew who has just been a mess from the jump and needed an extra $250 to score some drugs, and was like, I'm going to go down the street. And they've been coming every summer, so maybe they are familiar with the area. I mean, it feels like it's got that kind of a vibe. Am I wrong?
Well, it would be hard to get $250 from the Dermonds, because Mr. Dermond paid for everything with a credit card. The day before, he bought a loaf of bread and 2 cucumbers with a credit card. He wanted to get those points. And at least that's what his children tell us. So is that possible? Sure. But I don't find it any more possible than anything else. Again, I think somebody like that would have left a mess and wouldn't have left Rolex watches and things like that behind.
There was nothing disturbed. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't someone looking for money. If it was someone looking for money, they knew exactly where to go to get it. The sheriff's team didn't know that money was there, or the family didn't know that money was there, which is possible. Anything's possible, but it doesn't fit that. But one thing you have to remember, too, there are more people that come in and out and spend small amounts of time in the Lake Oconee area on a regular basis, on a yearly basis, than there are people who live here. And that's just, there are so many lake homes. There are so many, it is a resort area. And it's a worldwide known resort area. I mean, we have presidents who stay here. This is one of those areas where there are more people who come and stay or spend significant amounts of time here than year-round residents. That's one of the things that causes problems in a scenario like this.
If you're fascinated by UFOs, aliens, ghosts, demons, cryptid creatures like Bigfoot, Chupacabra, and Mothman, then I have the show for you. The Paranormal 60 with Dave Schrader. Each week, we investigate different claims of the supernatural and try to shed light into the darkness, bringing you the top guests and experts from around the world. Enter the fray. Then join me, Dave Schrader, your host, as we investigate all aspects and claims of the supernatural and paranormal. Listen on all of your favorite podcast platforms: Good Pods, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, Deezer, Player FM, Amazon Music, Audible, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. The answers to life's biggest questions and miracles and mysteries awaits you. So join me each week, 2 brand new episodes of the best in paranormal podcasting, The Paranormal 60 with Dave Schrader.
When you think about Great Waters and all the people coming and going and all that wealth concentrated in one place, surely there's a camera there recording every vehicle, right? Right. Well, sort of.
The security was not as tight then as it was today. If you were a contractor or something, they basically just waved you on through. And unfortunately, from a ground standpoint, there'd been a storm a couple of weeks earlier, and while the video camera was showing something on the monitor, it wasn't recording, hadn't recorded anything like 18 days or something like that. The deputy I sent to get the video from the guardhouse or the gatehouse was reluctant to even tell me. So I kept asking, where is he? Where's so-and-so? He said, he don't want to tell you. And of course, yes, did we look for cameras on the water? We did, but virtually everyone that had a camera on the water, it was pointed at their dock, or things like that. Man, I checked for satellites going over.
The video system was down at the gate, so there's no knowledge of anybody or no record of all vehicles that are coming and going during that window. So, if ultimately Mom was abducted and bludgeoned, and then her body was dumped into Lake Oconee. I mean, I guess they could have come by car and then ultimately had a boat somewhere that they could have transported Mom into that boat, but it certainly seems like it was a case of them coming and going by boat.
Hopes of this case getting any kind of assist from video surveillance, it doesn't happen. The Dermond alarm system isn't on, cameras on neighboring homes don't show anything useful, and the guardhouse system isn't recording. Solving a case means getting the right thing at the right time that has the right information. None of that happens here. Here's Andrew back in the field.
I've covered a lot of cases, and a lot of times the reason it's not solved is because the perpetrator just happened to step in the right place at the right time, whether it's out of frame of view of a camera like we talked about earlier, whether it's they just didn't leave anything behind. This case seems to have some tenets of that, of like there's a lot of luck that was on that killer's side.
It's just like the camera. The camera hadn't worked, the gatehouse hadn't worked in 18 days. But then I've worked a lot of cases where it was just bad luck that we caught the guy too, So that's absolutely true. To me, in this case, everything that could go wrong from an evidentiary standpoint seemed like it did. I mean, we're waiting on phone, okay, we're going to get their phone records from the cell phones. Hell, they didn't use their cell phones enough to, they barely were using computers. Every lead turned into poof. It was like everything that could go wrong from a standpoint of getting the normal phone records and things like that you normally get. They either weren't there, or just, these people didn't even have an ATM card. You know what I'm saying? We got their bank records, their tax records, we got everything, but the normal things that we normally solve crimes with just didn't exist.
I know that there's been a lot of conjecture about the house and the lake and the access to the house via the water. What is the position of your investigation as it pertains to these suspects or suspect, and whether water was the method which they got to the house?
Well, water was definitely the method that Mrs. Dermond's body was disposed of, because you could not get to the location where that body was any way except, I guess you could by helicopter, but except by boat. And as far as accessibility by boat, infinite. There are boat ramps all over. They're not, you don't have to pay to go. They're public boat ramps, people's houses. They're totally accessible.
To stand in the back of the Dermond house and look out at the water, the panorama is beautiful. But in the context of trying to figure out where the killers came and went, it can also be a little overwhelming. The vastness of Lake Oconee and the infinite possibilities makes the Dermond murders a crime that Sheriff Howard Sills is convinced he'll solve at some point.
Next time on Deviant. After listening to this episode, you may be thinking, how does this thing get solved? What is there to go on? Well,
they picked out certain things, and they did find DNA. Okay, and they found DNA that was not Russell Dermond's and was not Shirley Dermond's. What you see on TV is bullshit. Okay. I was watching some program last night, and this was in Australia, and they were asking, this detective was asking a medical examiner for DNA, and she said, well, we'll have it for you in about 6 hours. I said, God almighty, and these things on TV where they do it in less time than that. Come on, people. That's not the world. Nothing near the world. That doesn't exist.
In the real world and in this story, making DNA a useful piece of evidence can be its own fight. And it's a fight that Sheriff Howard Sills is more than willing to have. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Deviant is written, produced, and executive produced by Clark Goldband, Dan Simitovich, and me, Andrew Iden. Editorial and production consultation comes from Jenny Ament, with original scoring by Shuvo Sir. Marketing, sales, and distribution support comes from our partners at Gemini 13. Deviant is a production of Cold Open Media.